Hello there and welcome to week 7. Week 7 of the Flex course. We've covered a lot of stuff up until now and we've got 2 weeks left. This week is kind of the final week where we're presenting the traditional sort of format that we've been working with, where we have a rudiment and a groove and we look at that. The final week is going to be picking a lot of different elements from what we've worked on and then showing how we can combine and put those together. But this week is week 7 and we are looking at the 7-stroke roll as our essential rudiment this week. 7 and 7, why not? So here we are, week 7, the 7-stroke roll, and here you see the sticking of it. Right, right, left, left, right, right, left. And also left, left, right, right, left, left, right. So it is much like the paradiddle diddle that we did last week, where you have to practice it starting with the right hand over and over again, and then you flip it and you practice it starting with the left hand. This rudiment does not flip back and forth between your hands as you play it. So we will practice it using 16th notes, adding the bass drum, practicing the walking foot pattern, right hand starting, left hand starting, and we'll add toms and move it around and see what you can do with it. And the groove we're looking at this week is the 8th note hi-hat groove, but now we're going to have bass drum and snare 16th note activity going across that 8th note hi-hat. So we're expanding from what we did with the previous groove where we just had the 16th notes coming in on the bass drum. Now we're going to have them going on the snare and bass drum together. Okay, so let's pick right up into it and begin with the 7-stroke roll rudiment. The 7-stroke roll is one of those long form open rolls that we talked about when we did the 5-stroke roll. And the 7-stroke roll is very similar to the 5-stroke roll. It just adds on those 2 strokes, another set of double strokes, right? And just like how the 5-stroke roll went 1 E and a 2, 3 E and a 4, 1 E and a 2, 3 E and a 4. The 7-stroke roll goes 1/8 note longer, so it goes 1 E and a 2 E and 3 E and a 4 E and 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. So here we see how that's written out. Again, the count is right underneath it. 1 E and a 2 E and 3 E and a 4 E and. Your sticking is above it. So this first line is all starting right-handed. Da, 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 da. Let's start by playing that 7-stroke roll on the snare. And it's starting straight into the 16th notes here, but you can play those 16th notes slower than normal. You don't have to play them super fast. The idea is just that you get that feeling comfortable. So here we go. 1 So again, like the 5-stroke roll, I'm taking that final left stroke here and slightly accenting it. I'm not doing a super huge accent, but just enough to make it a good, crisp, solid ending. Da, 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 da. So that that last single stroke comes through nice and strong to close it off. So that's the 7-stroke roll with the right hand. Let's play it now with the left hand starting. Exactly the same, except we flip the hands. So there it is with the left hand leading. Now we're going to get into it with the bass drum. Same idea as we did with the 5-stroke roll. So we set up that bass drum. This is a quarter note pulse on the bass drum here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and. That's your 7-stroke roll, right hand starting with the bass drum. Same thing, left hand starting with the bass drum. 1, 2, 3, 4. Left, right, right, left, right. So that's it, starting left-handed with the bass drum underneath. Now the fun thing about the 7-stroke roll, and similar to the 5, is that you can move it around with the toms and things, and you can create some interesting sounds without having to get into strange sticking combinations. Using those double strokes to create 2 hits on a drum, you can move quite effortlessly to create some cool sounds. So here we are adding the toms. Right, right, left, left, right, right, left. What have we got here? We've got the bass drum playing on all the quarter notes, as you can see throughout the whole thing. We've got the snare on the first 2 rights, tom 1 up here for lefts, floor tom down here for the final 3 strokes. So dat dat doot 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 doot. So that'll sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's an easy way of making that sound. If you tried to play that using single strokes, you'd go around like this. It works, but you can do it a lot smoother and faster if you just play the 7-stroke roll that way. So that's a nice efficiency of movement there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you can do that quite fast and smooth without too much effort. So that's the first tom variation. Let's take a look at the second tom variation. Snare, snare, floor tom, first tom, snare. So you're starting with your left hand now, because we're doing the left hand version. First strokes on the snare, right hand down here on the floor tom, left hand up here, and finishing off on the snare with that right hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Left, left, right, right, left, left, right. Left, left, right, right, left, left, right. And that's how it sounds when you do it really fast. And because you're playing those double strokes on each of those drums, it's quite simple. Of course, you have to be patient and work hard on these rudiments, and even including going back to the very first week where we just played single strokes and we just played double strokes in the second week. The more you practice all of these rudiments, it will build up and get stronger, and you'll be able to get more relaxed, let the sticks bounce more effectively, and through doing that, all of your rudiment execution will improve. Because basically, the rudiments we're looking at in this course, they're only ever rudiments that involve single strokes and double strokes. Some are single strokes by themselves, some are double strokes by themselves, and then the others combine single and double strokes. But we're not getting into any of the other rudiments. There are a couple of different types that involve more challenging type of sticking patterns like flams and drags, which will be covered in a more advanced course from this one. But for the purposes of this course, we're only looking at single and double stroke combinations of rudiments. So as you practice all of these going through week to week, that facility for double strokes is going to improve. As long as you pay attention to your grip, staying relaxed here, keeping these fingers activated on the stick, keeping a loose and flowing wrist movement, and trying to get used to how that stick feels when it bounces. And if you're being a little bit diligent about that and paying it close attention, then this is going to improve and you'll be able to start to play these rudiments a little bit faster like I've showed you here. So the 7-stroke roll, you can move it around, you can practice it in different ways, you can play it all on one drum and then move it to each drum. Those are all 7-stroke rolls. You can play it between the hi-hat and snare. Between the ride cymbal and the hi-hat and snare. That's your 7-stroke roll. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those are all 7-stroke rolls. You can turn them into groove sounding things like that. You can play them as fills. Use them on the hi-hats and the cymbals. So they're really, really fun and interesting. And as you practice them in different combinations, your double strokes will improve. Focus on clear, clean, crisp definition when you're playing those. You want those double strokes to sound evenly spaced. Just like that. Okay, so that is the rudiment, the 7-stroke roll. Let's move on to our groove for this week. Now we're doing 4 variations of 16th notes on the bass drum and snare. Okay, so let's talk about these grooves before we dive in and play them. Last week, actually it was week 5, not week 6, it was week 5. We went through the bass drum 16th note variation grooves, and we saw patterns like this. 1 E and A, with that individual 16th note there being the A in between the and beat 2. We saw that pattern. We saw the dotted 8th note. So you know what that means. There's 3 16th notes hiding within that first beat, and the final 16th note is there. So now we see that same pattern up here on the snare. It's exactly the same. We have beat 2, 2, E, and there's A. So I'm going to play that groove and talk about how we execute this. Because this is the first example you've got of injecting the snare hand as a 16th note in between those 8th note hi-hats. This is a super amazing, important aspect of playing the drums, because as soon as you start to do this, you'll hear how your groove just gets lifted to a different level. Like up until now, all we've done is play the snare on 2 and 4. So we get beats like this. So the bass drum's moving around a little bit. You could do some things with that, but that snare has always just been on 2 and 4. Now we're going to put that little 16th note in there on the of beat 2, and you'll hear how it gives this new kind of pushing forward momentum sound to the groove. And as we do more of these combinations, you're going to hear just how this can spice up your regular beats by doing this. Okay, here we go. This is the first line. I'm going to play it over and over again so you can hear it, and then we'll break down how I'm executing that move. Okay, here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and now I'm going to play it a little bit faster so you can hear how it sounds in a little bit more brisk, bouncy sort of tempo. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it gives that driving kind of momentum, that extra snare. Boom, boom, bop, bop, boom, boom, bop, boom, boom, bop, bop, boom, boom, bop. There it is. So I'm going to break down how I'm executing that stroke. Because when you first begin trying to do this, you can find that your hands can trip each other up. You're not quite sure which hand is doing what and when. So just like how we did with the previous 16th note bass drum grooves, we need to look at that very specific little section where it's happening, which is right here. The and of 2 is this hi-hat. 1 and 2 and there's the snare that we're talking about. And 3. 3 is a bass drum and hi-hat. We know that the right hand is playing the hi-hat cymbal all the way across here. So if you look at that little section here, what we have is right, left, right. Right on the hi-hat, left on the snare, right on the hi-hat. Those 3 strokes are alternating. It's just a single stroke roll, like that, right, left, right. But that single stroke roll is split up between this hi-hat and the snare. Right, left, right. So that's how you stick that extra stroke in there. And because it's a 16th note, you know that it's exactly in the middle. It should be perfectly evenly placed in between these 2 hi-hats, the and of 2 and number 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So here's how it goes. Boom, a 2 and a 3 and 4 and 1 and a 2 and a 3. So that's all you're doing for this section right here. Right, left, right hand with bass drum. Right, left, right, and bass. And a 3. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and 4. So that's the motion. And a hi-hat and snare. And a 3. And when you speed it up, it just seamlessly kind of sounds like this. So that's the concept we're building upon now with the rest of these variations, is to start to place beats in between these 8th notes here. We've got one there, we've got one there. We also have an empty space here, We've got an empty space here. These are all spaces that you can inject some of these 16th note types strokes into. So let's take a look at the second variation. Here we go. The first quarter note is exactly the same. 1 and on the bass, just like this. 1 and There it is. The second quarter note on the snare is close to the same but different. Here we have another bass drum, okay? So we know that. We're going from beat number 2 on the snare, which is a single 16th note. You can see that because of the two connecting bars there. That one does not go all the way across, so it's just one 16th note. So this is that 8th note in the middle, and this is the final 16th note, which is the same as what we did here in the first beat. And then the remainder is the same, 3 and 4, just like this. So literally the only difference here is we're adding this bass drum on the E of beat number 2, the second 16th note. 1 E and 1 E and 2 E. There it is. Boom, tss, boom, bop, boom. 1 and 2 E. There it is. So let's play that one. Follow along on your sheet here while you listen to this. And we'll play it a few times nice and slow so you can hear with that new bass drum on the E of beat number 2. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So you hear how there's this kind of boom, boom, bop, boom, bop, boom, boom, bop. This back and forth sort of sound between the snare and the bass. And those are the syncopated beats. Syncopated beats mean beats that are off of the downbeat. The downbeat are our numbers 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 E and The E's and the ahs, those are the syncopated 16th notes that seem to jump up. That's why they're called upbeats. That's why they're called syncopation, because they jump up out of the normal level of those other beats that kind of drive along like this. Those beats all kind of sound, and then all of a sudden you have this. There they go. You get a little bit of this up and down sort of sound of movement in there. So let's play that beat a little bit faster, and you can hear how that sounds when it's kind of cranked up and a little bit more bouncy. 1, 2, 3, 4. Bop, boom, bop, boom, boom, bop. It gets really dancey now. It starts to really have some bounce and pep in it, and it sounds exciting and lively, and it's really fun to play when you get those strokes coming in between the hi-hat there, and you're moving in and out. It's really, really cool and fun to play. So let's try doing a little bit of a fun exercise where we play the first beat for one measure, and then we play the second beat for one measure. Okay? So we're just going to do variation 1 time, and then variation 2 1 time. And it's a very subtle change. Remember, it's only that one extra bass drum that comes in. So here we go. Let's do that. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Second one. 1 and 2 E and 3 and 4. Back to the first. 1, 2 and 3 and 4. second one. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. I'll go back again a few times. So that works really well because those two beats are so similar that it just becomes a 2-measure pattern that's got that slight difference in the second measure of the extra bass drum. But it still sounds like the same groove because it pretty much is very close to the same. Okay, let's look at the third variation here now. There it is. So we've got some different looking stuff here in this one that we need to talk about. This bass pattern, we've seen that before in week 5. 1 E and ah, boom, 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 bop. Single 16th note at the beginning. You know that this is the second 16th note, the E, which also has the and in it because it's an 8th note, so it has 2 16th notes in it. And there's the and on the hi-hat, which has no bass there because it's hidden in this one. And then the ah, the last 16th note. The snare is playing the same type of pattern that it played here. 2 ah, 2 ah. Now in beat 3, you've got this 16th note rest here. So that's telling you, do not play the bass drum together with the hi-hat there. Wait until the second 16th note, and then you play that bass drum. This is the 3 E. Single 16th note there, you can see, because of that little connecting bar. And then the 8th note there. So this is going 3 E and. Hi-hat, bass, bass. Hi-hat by itself, bass by itself, both together. And then you've got your snare on 4. So let's play this one and hear how it sounds, nice and slow. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 and a 3 E and 4. 1 E and a 2 and a 3 E and 4. Let's try that one a little faster so you can hear how that sounds. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's another cool groove. Good sound, nice and bouncy. A little bit tricky to play this beat number 3 without the bass. Just that hi-hat on beat number 3. That takes a little bit of getting used to. So I'll just point that out here so you know. Pay close attention to this area here. This means you're playing right hand on the hi-hat, right, left, right, bass. Right, left, right, bass. None of those are happening at the same time. So that's a little bit tricky. When you play up to this point, if you're having trouble, you could isolate this first half up to beat 3 and just play it like this. 1 E and a 2 and a 3. So you get used to going and a 3. Right, left, right. That hi-hat on number 3 being by itself with no bass, because your bass foot's probably going to want to jump in there. So isolate that little section there, the first half of the groove. 1 E and a 2 and a 3. Then you could put on the next bass drum stroke, which is the E, and get used to that little move, which is and a 3 E and a 3 E. Hi-hat, snare, hi-hat, bass. All of those 16th note lengths from each other, okay? So you could play the whole thing up till that point. 1 E and a 2 and a 3 E. 1 E and a 2 and a 3 E and a 3 E. So you get comfortable with that. And then the final thing is to play that quick 16th note bass drum after that last one together with your hi-hat. And that's a little bit tricky as well. So I'll play up till that point. 1 E and a 2 and a 3 E and. So a good way to focus on that, if you're struggling to get that last bass drum in there, because these two bass drums here happen quite quickly, one after the other, because of their 16th notes, you can start even right here. Start with this hi-hat on beat number 3 and just go 3 E and 3 E and 3 E and 3 E and. Okay? And that way you get used to that movement. Hi-hat, bass, both. So you can also take it back to this hi-hat right here. The and of 2, and then you'll play right, left, right, bass, bass. Those 5 strokes. And you could practice those over and over again, just like this. And 3 E and. Right, left, right, foot, both. Right, left, right, foot, both. And 3 E and. And 3 E and. So take those moments there and really look at them. Isolate those. And if you can do that nice and slow and steady like I've just demonstrated, these beats will come together and you'll know for sure that you're placing all these 16th note hits here in the right spot. And that's really important, because you don't want to develop and practice bad habits or practice sloppy habits. So it's important to, if you can, isolate these tricky parts just like I've demonstrated. Hone in on them like with a microscope and get them right. Okay, final variation. You can see that it's getting busier and busier with the snare now. Look at all those snare strokes that are coming in. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 snare hits in this groove. So we've got the exact same type of rhythmic breakdown happening in beat 1 as we do in beat 2. Of course, the notes are placed slightly different. We've got bass, snare, bass, and then here we've got snare, bass, snare. But the rhythm is the same. It's 1 E, and then 2 E, And the and of both of those is just being played on the hi-hat. You can see that hi-hat, look down underneath it, no bass drum. Same here, no bass drum, because that is hidden in that one. The second 16th note, the E, is written here as an 8th note, so there's no other stroke there. It's hidden up inside of that guy. So 1 E and 2 E and 3. We have the same thing as we had in this variation with the 16th note rest. So just a hi-hat by itself on 3. But now this bass drum stroke in the third variation is switched to the snare. So you've got this movement here, right, left, hi-hat, snare, and then bass and hi-hat together. So easiest thing to do is just play it. I'm going to play it nice and slow. I'll count it through, and you can hear it over and over again for a bit. Follow along on your sheet while I play this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and a 2 and a 3 and 4 and 1 and a 2 and a 3 and 4 and. Okay, let's play that a little bit faster. There's a lot of right, left between the snare and the hi-hat going on in this beat. And then the bass drum kind of sneaking in there too every now and then. So A lot to pay close attention to. I'm going to play it faster now so you can hear how it sounds. 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's a lot of movement in that groove. A lot of, which sounds good. It's cool and it's fun to play because it gets your hands moving around a lot. So again, let's quickly do a little honing in on some of those sections just so that you can get a clear guidance on how to practice this rather than feeling like you have to go through and just play this whole thing right away perfectly. You break it down quarter note by quarter note, just like we've been doing. So you've got your bass to snare, 1 E, bass, snare, hi-hat, bass. Do, da, do, da, do. Now this part is the major difference in here. And like we pointed out before, your hi-hat cymbal is played with your right hand, your snare with your left. So you can look at this little section and just say right, left, bass and hi-hat. That's what's going on there. So if you're struggling with it, you can just break that down. Start from the end of beat 2 and play it nice and slow. And a, 3, and a, 3, and. Literally just a 4 single strokes. Da, 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 and then the 5th one is on your hi-hat with the bass. Da, 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 da. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And a, 3, and 4, and. So take it in those little increments and work them out. The first quarter note grouping, 1 E and A. That's all that is. Bass, snare, hi-hat, bass. 1 E and A. And then you can look ahead and see what's happening on number 2. Snare and hi-hat. 1 E and A, 2. And there you are. Stop there. Here's a bass drum on E. E and A. So the first 2 quarter notes are 1 E and A, 2 E and A. 1 E and A, 2 E and A. 3 E and 4 and. So when you take it like that and break it down slow, 1 stroke at a time, your body has a chance to absorb and internalize those motions and get comfortable with what's going on. Because previously, up till now, your beat playing has been very much with 8th notes on the hi-hat and quite simple patterns where you're playing together. So that's all a little bit easier to just kind of jump right in and do. When you're sticking these strokes in between the hi-hats, that's when you need to kind of slow it right down, get kind of, get your magnifying glass out and really look at it closely and take it 1 quarter note section at a time. Right, left, right, foot, things like that. Work it out that slow. Slow motion is the key. And then repeat it. Just repeat it. And then add the next stroke. 1 E and a 2. 1 E and a 2. And you can do that a bunch of times. Then add the next one. Don't be afraid to take it that slow and meticulous, adding a 16th note on at a time. It will bring you really positive results. You'll learn it and you'll know that you're playing those 16th notes in the proper place so that they sound good. And it doesn't sound sloppy and rushed or crunched together. Okay, so that's been week 7. thank you very much, and I'll see you for the next one, week 8.